Today, we're going to look at 3 strange stories that are of the uplifting variety. But before we get into those stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload 3 or 4 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, please patch the like button's leaking water tank with dollar store Scotch tape instead of Flex Seal. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's stories. Influenced. They seem to just mindlessly follow their herd without thinking. But one sheep from New Zealand, who was named Shrek, dared to be different. In 1998, a sheep farmer from New Zealand got up early one morning and headed down to his shearing shed to give his flock their annual haircut. And one by one, the sheep would come in, and the farmer would expertly shear off their wool coats and send them back out to the pasture. But unbeknownst to this farmer, Shrek decided he didn't want a haircut. And in fact, he didn't want a haircut ever again. And so while his fellow sheep were marching down to get their wool cut, Shrek secretly walked to the back of the pen, snuck out the back gate, and ran away up over the hillside without anybody noticing. And when he was finally out of sight of the farm, he just kept on running until he found this cave high up on this mountainside that he could hide inside of. At first, the farmer didn't even realize Shrek was missing. He had many sheep to take care of, and so it was easy to lose track. But eventually, he did catch on, and he went out looking for Shrek, but he couldn't find him. And so eventually he had to just accept that Shrek was gone. 6 years later, in 2004, this farmer was out walking around the hillside a couple miles away from his farm when something moved in the corner of his eye. And so he turned and looked uphill, and there, perched on a rock, standing proudly, was the most absurd looking sheep he had ever seen. It was Shrek, and he looked like an enormous brown cotton ball. Wild sheep will shed their wool every year, but domestic sheep, like Shrek, just continue to grow wool every year until it's sheared off. But during Shrek's 6 years he spent living in this cave, he never got a haircut, and so his fleece just continued to grow and grow and grow, and by the time it was finally sheared off, it weighed 60 pounds. His fleece contained enough wool to make suits for 20 large men. Shrek shot to fame immediately. He was sheared live on New Zealand's national television, and his fleece was auctioned off to help raise money for a children's hospital. Shrek met the Prime Minister of New Zealand, and he became the subject of many children's books and made dozens of charity appearances. 2.5 years after his first live television event, Shrek was sheared again on live TV, this time off the coast of New Zealand on an iceberg, again to raise money for charity. Shrek would spend the next couple of years touring the country before settling down back at his farm, where he eventually died of old age in 2011. To this day, he is still considered a national treasure. In 1982, a young boy named Leandro was living in southern Brazil with his family. One morning, he got up and went downstairs in his house, and he began looking for his beloved family pet, a tiny young red-footed tortoise named Manuela. The first place he looked was the back room of the first floor, where Manuela spent most of her time, but she wasn't in there. So he decided to search the rest of the first floor, where Manuela was allowed to free roam, but rarely did. But after looking around, he still couldn't find her. He knew she was too little to climb up the stairs to the second floor, so he figured she had to be hiding somewhere on the first floor. So he ran into his kitchen where his family was getting ready for the day, and he enlisted their help to go looking for her. Within an hour, they had turned the entire house upside down and had made their way out into their backyard, but there was still no sign of the little tortoise. And so while Leandro and his siblings were running around their backyard yelling out for Manuela, their father called them over and told them that unfortunately, Manuela was gone. Most likely, she slipped out of one of the doors that had been left open and had found her way into the nearby forest that butted up against their property. Leandro and his siblings begged their father to go looking for Manuela in the forest, but he told them that because she was so small, it would be nearly impossible to find her. Leandro was crushed, and he just prayed that someday that little tortoise would come back to him. 30 years later, in 2013, Leandro and his siblings were now grown adults and had moved out and had started lives of their own. But in January of that year, their father passed away, and so the kids decided to go back to the family home and clear out some of his old possessions. The father was a bit of a hoarder and was always on the lookout for old TVs and microwaves and furniture that other people had thrown away. And he would snatch these things up, he would bring them to his house and stuff them them into his upstairs storage closet, promising his family he planned on fixing these things up. But he never did, and over time, as he collected more and more junk, that closet became so packed that Leandro's father couldn't even go inside of it, and so it was kind of just sealed off and forgotten about. Now that he was gone, the kids knew they would have to go in there and get rid of all that junk. They began hauling all of the stuff out and onto the curb for the trash collectors to pick up, and at one point, Leandro picked up a big, heavy box that looked like an old record player, and so he brought it outside, he set it on his curb, and then he turned around to walk back towards the house when his neighbor, who had been outside the whole time, jokingly yelled to him, "Hey, are you going to throw away this tortoise too?" And Leandro turned around, and there, poking its head out of the old record box, was Manuela the tortoise, happy and healthy as can be. 30 years earlier, Manuela had managed to climb inside of this old record box when their father had brought it home, and then the father brought that box upstairs and put it inside of his storage closet along with Manuela. Once she was inside this closet, Manuela just carved out a life for herself. She transformed the record box into her home, and she would leave it to eat termites and other insects and lick condensation off the walls. Red-footed tortoises are known for being extremely resilient. When food is scarce, they can go 2 to 3 years between meals. And if after that there's still no food, they can lower their body temperatures and other physiological processes and enter into this state of suspended animation that allows them to go even longer without sustenance. Because of this, it's no wonder that tortoises like Manuela live for at least 50 years on average. Leandro rushed over to Manuela, he scooped her up. He had missed her so much he could not believe he was looking at her again. And while Manuela had been doing just fine inside of her closet, she was no doubt very pleased to be reunited with her family. Most people don't realize just how smart crows are. In scientific studies, crows use logic to solve puzzles, and in one study, a crow was given a particularly challenging puzzle that required the understanding of analogies to solve it. And on this crow's first attempt, it immediately recognized the pattern and solved the puzzle within seconds. In the wild, crows will fashion their own tools, like a hook made from a bent twig that they'll use to help forage food more efficiently. Crows will also host these huge funerals for their fallen comrades. But the most fascinating aspect of a crow's intelligence is how they employ it against us. The same way we study crows study people. They watch our behavior to look for patterns to help them determine if an individual is a friend or a foe. Once a determination is made, that crow doesn't forget, and they pass it off to their friends and their family, who will immediately put this information to use, even if they've never had a first-hand experience with the person in question. For the people who are determined to be the worst foes, like people who have tried to do harm to the crows have been known to stake out that person's house, and every time they come outside, they will swoop down violently trying to hit them, and they'll caw at them the whole time, and this behavior can go on for years. On the other end of the spectrum, the people who are determined to be the best friends of the crows get a very different treatment, one that seems like it's straight out of a fairy tale. In 2011, 4-year-old Gabby Mann was living in Seattle, Washington with her family. One day, when she was getting out of the family car, she dropped a chicken nugget onto the ground, and before she could pick it up, a neighborhood crow swooped down and took the free lunch. A few days later, when Gabby was on her back deck having some food, she dropped a piece of bread on the ground, and just like the last time, a crow came flying in and took it before Gabby could do anything. And because Gabby was a messy eater, she continued to drop food everywhere she went, and so she continued to inadvertently feed these crows. Eventually, every time Gabby went outside, a murder of crows would assemble in front of her house, so a big gaggle of crows, and they would just follow her around everywhere she went. As Gabby got older, she grew to really enjoy the attention from all these birds, and so she started feeding them huge portions of her lunch before she hopped on the bus to go to school. When she got back in the afternoon and hopped off the bus, there would be this murder of crows sitting on the power line waiting for Gabby. When Gabby's mother discovered where most of her daughter's food was going, she wasn't upset. She was just worried her daughter wasn't getting enough to eat. And so she told her daughter to stop giving away her lunch, and instead they would go out and buy some food just for the crows. And so, starting in 2013, when Gabby was 7, she and her mom began feeding the crows every day. Each morning, they would go out into their backyard and they would refill the bird bath with fresh water, and then they would put peanuts into the covered feeder and scatter dog food in the backyard. And the crows loved it. A few weeks into this new feeding ritual, Gabby went outside one morning to refill the peanut tray when she noticed something was already on the peanut tray. There was a small earring. She brought it inside and she showed it to her mom, and her mom said she hadn't put it there. And so Gabby was convinced the crows had left her a gift. Her mom wasn't sure. But over the following few weeks, when more and more little trinkets like a marble and a polished stone and a screw and a metal hinge, when those started showing up in the peanut tray and in the bird bath, Gabby's mom actually went out and installed a camera to look out into the backyard to see if it was really true that the crows were the ones leaving these things behind. And after reviewing the footage, she was amazed to see that, yes, the crows would come in and they would eat their food, they would drink their water and clean themselves, and then they would leave behind these shiny little trinkets as if it was their way of saying thank you for the food. Gabby was over the moon for these little gifts. She began collecting all of them and putting them in a jewelry box and labeling them of when she got them and how important they were to her, ranking them from most favorite to least favorite, her favorite being this little piece of metal that said best on it, and she jokes that the crows have the other half that says friends. But the crows' most astonishing gift came the following year in 2014. Gabby's mother was an avid photographer, and one day she was out by herself photographing a bald eagle that had come into town. And while she was taking these shots, she managed to drop a lens cover to one of her cameras. And she heard it hit the ground, but she was so busy taking photos that she told herself she would pick it up before she left. But after getting totally wrapped up in this photo shoot, she forgot about the lens cap on the ground and wound up going home without it. That night, when she got back to her house, she happened to go out onto her back deck as the sun was setting, and she thought she noticed something in their bird bath. And upon closer inspection, she couldn't believe what was sitting there. She ran back inside and opened up her laptop and pulled up the footage from the bird camera she had set up, and there it was, a crow coming into the yard before she had even returned from this bald eagle photography session. This crow was in the backyard with the lens cap in its mouth, and it went into the bird bath and it very carefully washed the cap in the water, and then it placed it very delicately on the side of the bird bath and checked it a couple times to make sure it was steady, and then it flew off. This behavior is very significant because it means the relationship between the crows and Gabby and her mom was not a transactional one. They were not just simply leaving behind these trinkets as a way of paying for the food. They were doing it because they had grown attached to Gabby and her mom. So when Gabby's mom was out in town taking photos of this bald eagle, at least one crow had just gone with her. And when this crow saw her drop the lens cap, it snapped into action, swooped down, picked it up, and returned it to the house, because that's what best friends do. Today, Gabby and her mother still feed the crows every single day, and the crows still love Gabby and her mother. So that's gonna do it, guys. If you found the secret in today's episode, let us know in the comments what it is and where you found it, so give us the timestamp. And if you're the first to do that, we will pin you at the top of the comments section. If you enjoyed today's video and you haven't done this already, please patch the like button's leaking water tank with dollar store Scotch tape, not Flex Seal. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly 3 or 4 video uploads. If you want to get in touch with me, you can direct message me on Instagram or on Twitter. My username for both platforms is the same. It's JohnBallin416. I also have a ton of content over on TikTok where my username is Mr. Ballin. I also have a second YouTube channel called Mr. Ballin Shorts where I post random short videos and lost episodes. If you have a story suggestion, please submit it to our subreddit just called Mr. Ballin. It's linked in the description below. So whether I see you on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Reddit, YouTube, or some combination, just know that I really appreciate your support. And until next time, that's going to do it. See ya.